Recording. It's on.
Oh, it's on now.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
fantastic.
been on.
Hey, man.
Hey,
How you been?
good. Tell me, you got better news.
Yes. So it's been, how long has it been since I've been in India now? 3, 5, almost 9 months, closing on a year.
Cool.
And it's been a wild, unexpected and expected roller coaster of a time. It's had many ups and downs, but it's been a very beautiful experience. And it's not an experience I'm willing to give up so easily. So, yeah, it's been one of those things that many people that live in India might know, and that's the regulation and delegation of particular governing bodies and getting business started. And that was my biggest challenge. And yeah, I had to deal with the Foreign Relations, registration office or whatnot, the FRRO.
Mm-hmm.
And they were great. Lovely people, but the process for a foreigner took a significant amount of time as to what, not just but I know yourself, what we first thought it would.
Yeah.
Um,
So we'll come to the unexpected part.
mm,
What was the expected part? As in, what happened as you were expecting? I think there's a little of it, but go on.
so I guess the expectation that I had set myself when setting up the business and going through all the FRRO guidelines and how a business visa sort of comes into being. The first time when I did it, before I came to India, was a very, very simple process.
Mm-hmm.
I simply just made the application, said the outlay of what the business model entailed, and I had mentioned that it will involve some level of communication and some level of delegation within the agricultural sector. And the only interaction that I had from the FRRO, whether it was a phone call or an email, in this case a phone call, was them merely calling me up while I was in Australia and just asking me if I had any plans to do business within the cannabis and hemp sectors. Obviously that wasn't the case, and it took me by surprise, naturally, but I told them, and that was the only thing. And then they approved it. It was a very, very simple process. However, this second run
Mm-hmm.
to get the visa extension was one marked with many trials and tribulations and anxiety and little spouts of depression and anger and a whole host of things. But it mainly revolved around, in my opinion, my unique situation.
So you came here in what month?
October last year.
October last year.
Yeah.
Then you went back for a while because of your personal situation.
Yep.
And then you came back again.
Yep.
Now, how has it been? The overall sort of feel of this country. Now you got a tactile experience here.
Yeah. Well, I can only base off of my observational experiences and whatnot out of like Gujarat and Maharashtra.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're probably a good basis point because they're kind of obviously centralized between the north and the south. So I assume that there's a healthy mix of people from the north to the south, a good variety of different thought, different ethos when it comes to the nature of India.
You can definitely start with the time I betrayed you at the airport.
No, you never betrayed me at the airport. You just threw me in the deep end. You're just like, hey, here's your paddleboard. Fuck off. No, but like when I came back, I think the biggest obstacle was being holed up in a hotel for a month.
Ah.
So me and my partner, it was fine to be in the hotel, but finding a place to live was definitely a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So we looked for a 1 or 2 BHK. We ended up deciding on the 2 BHK because of the business. It took us a good month. We looked at about 45, 50 properties.
Mm.
And that was western side of Ahmedabad, a couple of pockets on the northern side, central, and on the southwestern side of Ahmedabad. Um, and it was a challenge, and it was mainly a challenge because me and my partner aren't married. Even though there's that expectation that we will be married in the coming months, we weren't. So obviously there's a cultural norm here that doesn't necessarily exist in all its forms in Australia. That being that the idea that a man and woman can live together even though they're not married and be in a sexual and emotional relationship is a bit of a foreign, not a foreign concept, but a concept that's far disconnected from what the cultural norms have been in India. That's from my observation, and fair enough, right? Um,
This might be also watched by her side,
that's okay.
what you just said.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
By the time they look at it, we'll be married anyway. That's all good. But yeah, so we got our place, and the
It's a good place.
no, it's a fantastic place. I love it. The society's great. I've participated in garbas. You know, I've participated in the pujas that they've done downstairs, and everyone's been super friendly, irrespective. Not everyone obviously speaks English, and not everyone in the society even speaks Hindi. I mean, the older crowd, like the older aunties and uncles, you know, that are in their, you know, sort of 60s and whatnot and above, they don't. But most of the younger families and that speak Hindi and a little bit of English, which is fine. But yeah, I mean, we got settled in, but still the main problem existed, which was the FRRO in many respects. And that was just the nature of them requesting something, us providing that thing that they requested, and then they would come back with something else, and then we would come back and provide that. So it'd be like, they'd ask for 2 items over the next like 3 weeks instead of asking for all of this from the very beginning. And right at the very beginning, what was requested of us, or what was requested of anyone to do the visa extension a process as a foreigner, they have all the items required. And they asked for all these items as per the guidelines, and we provided every single item. But because of my situation, because I'm a unique case, because I didn't come over with a pre-existing company and 500 staff members under my belt and things like that, I fell into a unique miscellaneous category.
Yeah, you came unlike a usual white guy.
Yeah, they were kind of they were shocked. They're like, how's this Gora? Like, why is this white guy like wanting to come and live in India? Usually it's the other way around. We want to go to Australia. This guy wants to come here. So it was kind of hard for them to conceptualize, and especially in a state like in Gujarat, and especially in Ahmedabad, that sort of emphasizes itself on this ideal set of like a capital market and building enterprise and expanding enterprise. So for them to like come with this particular attitude was very strange.
Yeah.
But I understand, you know, they had to do their checks and balances and all this and that. But at the end of the day, it took a lot longer than what we wanted it to.
I think in hindsight, we can say that we should have gone through a consultant.
Yeah.
And that would have made things easier.
Probably.
But we didn't know any better at that point of time.
No.
And also, as you are saying, your case fell into this unique category where a bear came riding on a tricycle.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly that.
So
Tricycle being the Mrs. Scooter.
yes, Mrs. Scooter, of course. But then they didn't know how to deal with you, basically.
No.
And given that this application perhaps was not made in Delhi or one of the tier 1 towns, that made the case even stranger.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what happened. But I'm glad and relieved that finally this has happened.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It was, dude, sleepless nights, anxiety, you know, having this thought in my head, you know, oh, if they decline the visa application, like the extension, then like me building a life here is just like all for naught. And then I got to head back, and then I'm going to be banned from even operating a business in India for 5 years. And what happens with my relationship with the missus? Like, what happens with future business plans and future relationship developments, my friendship with you, and all these extracurricular factors, everything that sort of comes with being here, right? Like I was worrying. My brain was feeding that chaos. Like it was,
Yeah.
and it was, and I'm glad I love my missus, and she's been the best because she's been such like a supporting rock in all of this, and she slapped me a bunch of times, metaphorically slapped, of course, when it comes to like me feeding that little itch.
Upper cheeks, lower cheeks.
Lower cheeks,
Uh,
always lower cheeks.
yeah.
So like she's been great, and at the end of it, I'm just glad that it got approved. I wasn't really happy with the outcome of how it all got approved because they basically said like we're not going to approve you for the 5 years, we'll approve you for another 12 months to prove, to show the business and what its capabilities are. And they didn't even give me the whole year. They're basically saying, well, because the visa expired in May, even though I applied before the expiration, and it was, I was basically living like an illegal Rohingya in India for the last 4 months.
Yeah.
Except I'm a Goro, of course. But yeah, like living illegally. But there were some terms and conditions that I was happy to placate to, and that was like, it's fine that your visa's expired. Just like don't leave the state. Like you can go and explore Gujarat, do whatever, but just stay in Gujarat. And I'm like, okay. But that, bear in mind, they told me this after I'd already gone back to Nasik. But that's fine. As long as I provided their C form and whatnot, which I did, they were all sort of happy with. But even that, they asked for extra things. It's not that they didn't ask for extra things, but they asked things of me that it wasn't my responsibility to provide, which is those C forms. And I found out this is after they asked me about these C forms. Now, what the C forms are is the hotels have to create an identification form for every time someone stays at the hotel. When a foreigner stays at the hotel, they have to provide that C form to the local police department or the FRRO or the corresponding government office that deals with the FRRO, the nearest FRRO, within 24 hours. And we went to the police station. And that hotel that the missus and I stayed at, they didn't provide it at all over the month. They didn't even provide not just mine, everyone in the hotels they didn't provide it to. So I had to go out of my way, and fine, I had to do it, but I basically had to call all the hotels that I stayed at last year, which was, I don't know, 20, 25. That includes the hostels. That's just from all the travel, right? And then, staying around Ahmedabad and experiencing the different pockets and whatnot. But look, at the end of it all, it got approved. We've got 6 months essentially to show what the business is capable of, and yeah,
I'm glad and relieved that because once it's approved, then you've got time to perform.
Yes.
The earlier situation was that you really didn't know what to do. You can't take a step forward, basically, because if you do that and this thing doesn't eventualize, then it all has to get packed and shifted again.
Yeah.
Right. So that 3-month period is really frustrating. I'm glad we're out of it and we are starting Aumstead.
We're starting Aumstead Private Limited.
Yep.
To be specific. But yeah, what do you want to speak about first, I guess? Like the sort of angle of the business, the
We'll come to that, but
okay.
I further want you to tell what inspired you to be here.
Oh no, where do we begin? How far back have we got to go? We going back to like the middle of the year last year or what?
We'll go with your broken headphones.
Okay. So Himanshu and myself got introduced to one another early 2023.
Who's Himanshu?
Are we cutting this out?
No, obviously not.
Oh, you're shit staring. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck, did I just dox my mate? We started, we became acquainted last year. We hit it off pretty well.
Mhm.
We got along like a house on fire.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was obviously having these developmental thoughts in myself and these shifts in things in my personal life. And I was sort of looking for something, and it was kind of there, but it also kind of wasn't. It was like in my peripherals, like I could feel it. I knew that there was something sort of deeper to grab onto in some respect. I was looking at this obviously through like a spiritual lens. And then, you know, I had conversations with yourself and others, but predominantly yourself when it came to the nature of actually getting my hands dirty, so to speak. And I was, you know, I mentioned to you that I was having problems at home. There was electrical problems. I mean, you had first mentioned it, and I knew these things were happening, but I didn't even register it until you had mentioned it. Like lights flickering in the house, problems with like just general electricity, a sort of bad aura in the house. And at this stage, I had become somewhat familiar with the energies in some respect. Like it was still almost like primordial thoughts. Like I could feel it was there, but I couldn't really analyze it and whatnot. But you sort of guided me in the right direction. You had said to me after I'd mentioned about the electrical problems and my headphones sort of going out of whack, and you know the right one not working for months, and the Wi-Fi constantly dropping out. The lights in the house were flickering. There was a bad energy. There was a lot of tension. These a coalesce of things essentially. And you had mentioned to me to do a Hanuman Chalisa, and I was like, huh? And then you went over it with me and we spoke about it, and I took it very seriously. And you know, I did a very basic form of it, and you provided a great audio track. That I don't know if we're going to put it in the video as a description, maybe put it in the description of the video.
So that had the recital.
Yes.
How you pronounce it in English.
Correct.
But you know, transliterated from Sanskrit, and then the meaning of that.
Yep.
Right.
And it was.
And the tone.
Yes. Yep.
Important.
So I took it very seriously. I did it in an afternoon. I didn't do it like first thing in the morning as the first time. I did it like late in the afternoon. I think it was maybe 5-6 o'clock somewhere there, PM. And I lit a candle. Oh no, sorry. I've got a little gold singing bowl, and I used a cotton bud, and I made a wick, and I had some ghee. I used the ghee, and I lit the wick, and I played it. I concentrated very deeply into particular thoughts of things that I feel need to be sort of adjusted in my life. And I knew immediately after the fact, I felt slightly different, just slightly, but enough that it made my mind wander into like the ethereal, so to speak. I had a great sleep. And then that next morning I woke up, the lights had stopped flickering, the Wi-Fi stopped dropping out, the right earbud on my JBL headphones that was dead for like 2-3 months all of a sudden like started working, and I was absolutely bewildered. I couldn't believe it. And I remember one of the first things I said to you about it was like, I wouldn't even know how to explain this to my Gorda friends. I would not know how to explain it to them. I can't chalk it up to a mathematical equation. I can't back it onto a blackboard and some scientific equation. Nothing like that. But even the energy in the house had shifted. I noticed my mum was better. Like her mood had adjusted. Even my brother's mood had adjusted. And I said, well, shit, I'll keep doing it.
Single recital.
So then I just kept on doing it. And right at the beginning, I was doing it 4 or 5 times a week for the next 2-3 weeks, maybe a month. And then that's when that event happened.
Yeah, I knew Hanuman could do a lot of things, but I didn't know that he was also an electrician.
Yeah. I mean, I was still fumbling around with like who's Hanuman at the time. I mean, I knew obviously.
Monkey God.
But man, it was incredible. I completely swear by it, and since I've been in India, a couple of people have asked me, and I've spoken with them and said, I do like Hanuman Chalisa, and they're like, wow, how do you find it? And I tell them, and I don't go into the full history of what had happened, but everyone here seems to be on board that Hanuman Chalisa provides a massive impact to the energy in the house and the sort of overall feeling within oneself. But yeah, I started doing it 4 or 5 times a week. For the next 3 weeks, I would say, 3-4 weeks. And then that event happened. Now, bear in mind, by this stage, I was still suffering from one thing that I couldn't get rid of, which was night terrors. So I was having these problems essentially where that waking, that point between being awake and falling asleep, I would have difficulties between that point where my mind would go into this weird spot where I would get cold and I would have this feeling there was something in the room, and if I'd laid on my side, I'd almost have this strange experience of kind of like vertigo, but not really. But then there was this overwhelming sense of fear wouldn't be the word that I would use, but this overwhelming sense of either desperation or anxiety, uneasiness, uncertainty is what I would say. But a month after doing the Hanuman Chalisa, then this particular night, I had that event happen again. But this time it was not completely different, but the feeling, warmth instead of cold, a feeling of ease, a feeling of comfort as opposed to discomfort and uneasiness and uncertainty. And as my eyes were sort of closed, and my eyes were sort of opening and closing, but at this point when I was drifting, all of a sudden this golden head just appeared in front of me. And the face was not necessarily blurred out, but it felt like it was spinning, like there was a multitude of faces that was constantly doing this. But the crown on top, and I remember I said this to you, the crown on top was very distinct in my mind. It had a very specific pyramidal shape, and it kind of reminded me of like the pyramids in South America, that step pyramid style. And then you did the craziest thing. You looked
but this happened before I told you about...
This happened after the Hanuman Chalisa. This didn't happen before.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm certain.
Okay,
this happened after.
Better.
It was like the Hanuman Chalisa, like, got the juices like ready and like almost primed me for the next major step. And I remember that next morning when I'd spoken to you about it and we were on a call and I'd explained it to you, you just looked off to your right-hand side and your jaw dropped and you went quiet, and then you're like, is this what it was? And then you just pulled the photo, of, I forget it's Krishna, obviously, but with all the...
Vishwarupam. Yeah, the grand... it's the grand Krishna. It's the Krishna, the supreme Brahman form of Krishna.
Man, when you showed me that photo,
yeah,
something inside me, like then and there, it came out like a bat out of hell in many respects. After seeing that, I was sold to buy a ticket and come to Bharat.
I needed that.
And it was a one-way ticket. I had no intention of coming back. I was like, fuck this, let's go. So I bought it, came in October, left in December for a little bit because of the family dilemma back home, and then came back in March. But my whole time here, bro, has just been, outside of the business related stuff, has been an exquisite experience, like an absolute blessing of an experience. And obviously most of my time spent here has just been in Gujarat and Maharashtra, a little bit in Andhra Pradesh with Tirupati and Sri Kalahasti, but everywhere I've gone has just been smiles, happiness, willing to help, great food, except that one place in Nashik, but we can talk about that another time. Shouldn't have gotten the chicken. But yeah, now we're just down to business.
So this is one thing that I really like about you, Goraz, that, you take risks.
Not all of us.
Not all of us, but better than us. Better than people on this side.
Well, if you can show me a bunch of white people migrating to a third world country.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to see it, but I don't think
it's called United Nations.
I don't know if we can put this podcast on now. It might get blacklisted.
All right.
But, look, it was a big step for me.
Pass me that mouse.
Oh.
Just get up and pass.
It was a big step for me naturally, right? Like, you know, when I explained it to my mum,
Yeah, what was what was her reaction?
she couldn't wrap her head around it for the first like 2 months.
Her name is Brenda.
Her name is Brenda.
Yes.
So she couldn't wrap her head around it for like the first 2 months. She knew that I was adamant on the decision, that I was ready to go. The visa, by this stage, the visa had already been booked in. Passports was already done. Everything had been signed. You know, everything was ready to go, essentially. And she came around naturally. She began to be a little bit inquisitive and ask sort of questions in some very rudimentary senses. But because I was baptized Roman Catholic and I went to an all boys Catholic, you know, a private all boys Catholic college and whatnot, she saw it as what many Westerners see India from the perspective of the spiritual backing,
Mm-hmm.
pagan, right? Idol worship, pagan, devil worship, foreign faith, something that's beyond the scope. And dude, don't even get me started on that, because all these Christians, they're like, how can you do idol worship? I'm like, how can you go to a church and you've got a massive idol of Jesus up there and say you're not doing idol worship? But anyway, I don't want to get into that. That's, you know,
that's their preference.
But point being, my mum, she was supportive. She was uneasy about it, naturally.
But definitely, she's your mother.
Of course. I mean, her biggest concern was that she'd never see her son again. Because who knows what would happen, right? Like, anything could happen. I could get stabbed on the street. And obviously it didn't happen. And I don't have any intention for these things to happen. But from her standpoint, going to a place where English is not the dominant language and it's not white people,
totally understandable.
That's where she came from. And that's just the reality. I think the reality would be the same for if an Indian moved to a Western country, or if an Indian moved to Australia and the family was, you know, not on board. It doesn't seem to be the case. It looks like a lot of people want to come to Australia, but point being. But yeah, you know, my brother, he was kind of happy for me. He still couldn't really understand it. He's like, what? Hinduism? Oh, I don't know anything about that, mate. So it was a bit, you know, right. Yeah, he was a bit all over the place, but yeah, I mean, everyone was really supportive. My godmother was the most supportive. She was the best. Like, she's got like idols of Buddha in her house, and yeah, man, like, I wouldn't call her a staunch Buddhist by any stretch of the imagination, but like, spiritually, like, she has that understanding in many respects. So she was all cool, and she sort of calmed my mum down about it all. Like, don't worry about him. Like, he knows what he's doing and blah, blah. And yeah, so my mum's quite supportive of it now. Like, she still doesn't understand it all, but she understands that I'm safe and I'm okay. And, you know, I'm not part of a Syrian drug trade that goes over Pakistan or anything like that. Yeah,
the Indian polity, the Indian administration in general, used to have a very good understanding of white people. I mean, they used to like them a lot, and it was easy access. But then this case of I told you about David Headley.
Yep.
Happened. White guy. I think he was half Pakistani. Came and did the recce for Mumbai attacks, and a lot of shit went down. And after that, I guess they've been suspicious of everyone. And why I brought this particular angle at this point of time is that, so you are privy to a lot of conversations that happen outside the brown spectrum.
Yeah.
Right? I'm calling.
No, you're right.
Right. The brown spectrum is basically this area where like Indian people go and come back from.
Yeah.
Right. The whether it's the online space or civil society where they interact with.
Yeah.
And then there is the world outside that, right? And you kind of dip into both the pools.
Yeah, I do.
Right. Yes. And you've been you have come to the understanding that the way India's image is projected is not what it is.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. And we've had this discussion before. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I guess the thing that's sort of highlighted right now and has been highlighted in some respect, specifically online, mind you, in the last 3 months it ramped up, but it's been there. I've noticed it's been there for maybe not 12 months, but as I said, I've only noticed it in the last sort of 7, 8 months or so. In the last 3, maybe even 4 months, there was this like almost hyper acceleration of this particular mentality towards Indians, right? People within the subcontinent. And that was everyone's shitting on the streets. Everyone's drinking cow urine. Every single person is bathing in cow urine. Every single person is bathing in cow feces and eating cow feces, doing human sacrifice, eating human body parts, and all these pagan demonic things that goes into these. I would be looking at them now as like foreigners, those foreign things, right? It's true. That's how, and not everyone, of course,
Yeah.
but that's something that was permeating across social media quite prevalently. But my experience here has been anything but that. Now, I'm not saying open defecation doesn't happen. It does, but it's not this rampant thing that people make it out to be. And I know that there's that Swachh Bharat mission that was introduced by the BJP in 2014 or 2015 to reduce, to completely stamp out open defecation across India. And it was something that, in hindsight, looking over the last 10 years, has actually been quite successful. Comparative to, and I don't know what India was like before 2014, but looking through the history records, under the rule of the Congress Party, it was anything but good when it came to the nature of stopping open defecation. It didn't seem like there was any real effort to actually stop it, right? But the BJP did something excellent, right? They've actually introduced infrastructure and put toilets and clean running water and waste management systems. I'm not going to get into the dilemma. I mean, we can get into the waste management systems, but at a bare minimum, at the basic systems, they've been introduced from the most richest areas to the most poorest areas. And they cover a wide variety. Now, I believe there's either 10% or just less than 10% of open defecation still happening in India. But comparative to what it was prior to 2014, when you're looking at somewhere in the ballpark of like 78 to 80%, that's a massive achievement in 10 years. And people don't appreciate those little things. But foreigners don't really get it. I can't believe I'm calling my own people foreigners. My God.
Oh, you're the brownest.
I know.
The brownest Gora the world has ever seen.
But the reality is that India is a very, very new country.
A large country.
A very large, but also, if we look at it as a nation state, it's very new.
Yes.
And it had to overcome a lot of logistical challenges, specifically around the issue of government corruption. And the major party that stood in power for at least 54, 55 years had a lot of that. And subsequently, a lot of things that would be of the best interest of the civilization as a whole didn't come to fruition. And it seems like the BJP has done a very good job at bringing that into the fold. So, yeah, it's not what people make it out to be. Not everyone on the streets, not every person is bathing in cow urine or anything like that. It's this myth that's being spawned by propaganda, right? And fair enough. You've got foreign forces that don't want India to succeed. Why? Well, look where India is now. India is the second country to land a bloody, what do you want to call it? A rover on the moon, which is incredible.
Yep.
So, like, at a base level, you can look like, well, obviously India is going places. The capital market's grown exponentially. The middle class has grown exponentially. It's poised itself to be number one GDP in the next 20 years. So, like, there's a lot of good that India has from a grassroots level all the way to the top. And I wish more foreigners would appreciate it. But at the end of the day, bro, it's their loss. It's their loss at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So my take on this is that there have been existing stereotypes about India, Bharat, and social media is a cesspool of your worst expectations.
Absolutely.
Right. And when you read those two things in the same sentence, you realize that to amplify negativity on social media is absolutely cheap and easy. and it also pays off,
Hmm.
right? Combine these three things and you get a disaster,
Yeah.
right? The fourth point is that a lot of Indians themselves have been guilty participants in this narrative formation,
Absolutely.
right? They're not looking at things on a comparative basis.
Hmm.
They're just making whole out of a part.
Yeah.
And then when you speak, so you should basically know where you should criticize and where you should speak negatively, and where you should hold your horses,
Hmm.
because it is not that the world is made up of free thoughts and liberal people,
Hmm.
right? It's good to assume that it's the best thing that can happen to the world, but when you do these things, you ought to be balanced. And even if you're not balanced, you need to be realistic.
Yeah.
Like you said that, okay, we had a different start point,
Yeah.
right? And from that start point, we had our own issues, for the lack of better word,
Yeah.
and we have come to some point, and the world is not perfect.
No.
If you look at all our neighbors, we can easily say that India is, amongst the top 2 3 countries that there are all around in this region overall. You can criticize it, and of course you should criticize it,
Hmm.
but there has to be, a balanced view that should be taken.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you're taking it, because uh, we've been very poor at our outreach
Hmm.
with foreign countries.
Yeah.
I think at I should not comment on whether whatever the government is doing, because they know better. But at a people to people level, we've been very terrible at it. That's my viewpoint. We've been terrible at marketing ourselves. We've been terrible at just you know having conversations as equals.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
understand?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Right. So either we're trying to teach the world something, or we're just too impressed by them. There
Hmm.
is no scope for a balanced conversation. That okay, let two equals sit down and have a conversation to make each other's perspective and lives better. That kind of conversation hardly happens.
It's the same in the West, dude.
Hmm.
It's not really that different. I think, and this is a problem I've noticed with India, and I think it's compounded and accelerated to such a degree in India because there's this. I mean, if we look at the cultural fabric of the majority,
Hmm.
right? You have idol worship. That idol worship does extend into things like Bollywood. That thing
Hmm.
extends into celebrities, influencers, things of that nature, cricketers, right? What's his name? Rohit Sharma, well, like whoever, right? All these prominent cricketers, etc. Um, and that's why I suspect that it's has this almost like this compounded effect that's very prevalent in India, and I think what that does is it creates this imbalance between the majority of people that are down here and the small minority that sit at the top that everyone's looking at like they're not gods necessarily, but certainly walk in the light of what could be seen as an idol. And fair enough, right? I'm not knocking the mentality or anything like that. That's just the way it is.
Hmm.
I'm sure it changes in time as India, as a nation state, becomes more mature and things balance out, and this, you know, the direction of the country happens to move into the realm where it benefits this sort of majority of the people that allowed the foundation of this country to to continue essentially. I think you'll find that will level out. But right now, it's certainly not the case. And right now, there is this thing where, you know, you've got all these like micro celebrities that they're being propped up as like the voices of what is happening in India.
Hmm.
But it's not the actual thing because it's a lot of interlaid propaganda and it makes India look bad from a foreigner's perspective. And then at the same time, like you mentioned, the people within India aren't communicating that to the rest of the world. So there's this degree of separation when it comes to the communication. But that's changing. I've noticed that that's changing. And I might be a little bit biased because I've been...
That's changing with this conversation.
Well, this is one thing, yeah? But these are happening more and more frequently. And it seems like India right now is poised, and it seems a lot of people, especially the younger generation, are reaching out reaching out to a foreign audience to sort of showcase India in a different light. But as that's ramping up, this anti-India propaganda over here is subsequently ramping up alongside it. Because like you mentioned, what's India surrounded by? Literally surrounded by enemies on all sides. That's the reality. And I say enemies very loosely, of course, but the nations that surround India...
Differentiated interests.
That would be a better way to say it.
Or competing interests.
Competing interests. Competing interests.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, like these things will change, but it takes time. India is very, very young. Like India is very young comparative to many other nations on the planet. And even if we look at the West is still quite young. I'd like to think they're quite immature in many respects, but they've been propped up into a position where they're placating themselves like they're the mature one at the table. But come into any sort of dialectics around government or policies or social fabric and stuff like that, they're all children. They're all children. They don't know how to regulate themselves. They don't know how to regulate a society. Look what's happening in the West right now. It's absolutely ridiculous. And they're just playing blame games wherever they can find it. Blame the migrant here, blame the migrant there, blame the migrant over there, instead of like actually looking at like, well, hold on a minute. Why did that even happen in the first place?
Yeah.
Because it's just a bunch of elected children. That's why. And they haven't recognized. It's like like I mentioned before about a bunch of Goras just coming to India. If India just decided tomorrow to let 20 million German refugees come in, that would destabilize the cultural fabric. And that's what you're seeing happen in the West. But not to get too much into that, my point being is that like India is quite mature in many respects when it comes to the nature of interpersonal dialogue and when it comes to the nature of geopolitical dialogue. And I think that's a major threat to a lot of competing interests. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how have the brownies been treating you so far? Brownies as in brown people.
Yeah.
But we are shades of brownie.
There's a lot of shades.
Yeah.
I was actually shocked by how many shades there were.
Yeah.
Because I was expecting the same across the board. And when I came into Gujarat, I'm like, oh man,
we've got white chocolate brownie all the way to dark chocolate brownie.
You've got all the different variations of milk and dark chocolate, from 60% all the way to 95% dark chocolate.
We've
all
got
the way through.
I think it started 15 and goes all the way to 110.
It does. I was actually surprised by how many fair-skinned, very fair-skinned Indians there were. Sorry. That was a bit of a shocker. I mean, not like it's a bad shocker.
I'm pretty fair-skinned, see?
Yeah. No, you are. Absolutely.
This is my...
Absolutely. But Rahul, 5 minutes down the road, is 95% dark chocolate.
Oh, 100%.
Like,
100%.
there's a wide variety. But to your question...
There's no sunburn.
That's a sunburn.
Yeah.
I tan up. I go gold when I get bronze.
See this?
Yeah.
I'm not, like, there's nothing to be proud or not proud about it. It's just the way I am.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. What are you going to do? I mean, I know some people try to change their skin color.
Oh, fair is so lovely.
That's crazy to me.
You should feature in a Fair and Lovely ad.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. What are they going to do, though? They've got to, like... They can't make me any more white than I already am.
They'll make you reflective.
And they'll be very nice about it as well. They'll tell me, they'll introduce me to, they'll be very nice. We're going to make you reflective. And that's, to bring that back to your question, I've experienced that 98% of the time. Everyone here has been, they've received me very well in many respects.
Okay.
From just coming into their place of business, just a random hello, conversation on the street, random interaction with a rickshaw driver, business, anything, going into a mandir, etc., just going to archaeological sites, caves in Maharashtra, or, going to Somnath, Jyotirling, anywhere I've been, everyone has received me quite well. That being said, I still get particular looks, and I can empathize with the brown community and the black communities that come into Western countries that are dominated by Westerners, because I experienced that here. Like, I'm not going to lie, I know that people are looking at me, right? That happens all the time, doesn't matter where I go. And but the looks generally are of like curiosity more than anything. But occasionally I'll spot a gentleman, a lovely gentleman, giving me a bit of a brown nosed look, like, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, I get something, but hasn't happened a lot, but it has happened.
Anomaly.
But then, a part of me just wants to do something cheeky and go like, what is it? I've got it right there. Aap kya dekh raha hai? Have I got it right? Probably not. Like, yeah, like, what the fuck are you looking at? Like, but in the nicest way possible. But yeah, everyone's been fantastic, man. Like, hospitable to the 10th degree. Haven't gone wrong in any, and that's from all the religious communities, mind you. Doesn't matter who it's been. Everyone's been very, very hospitable. But obviously I interact with one community more than any of the other communities. But yeah, it's been overall, it's been a very friendly experience so far.
I think you also come across as kind of an oddball because you didn't, like usual white people, you didn't end up in Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore,
Goa,
or Goa,
Rishikesh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And you came to Gujarat. And I think I am instrumental in creating that anomaly.
Absolutely.
Right. So you had a very different experience.
Yeah, for sure.
This state is different.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. Every state is different. This state again is different in a certain way from the rest of India, that you don't get people without any sort of local connection, who just drop in here and try to make a living, right? Like you did. And that reflected in the reflections of the FRRO officials as well.
Yep.
Right. And when you went to get a house on rent, you got a reaction, "Arey gare bhi puja karte hai."
Yeah, so for the listeners, for anyone I assume most of the listeners are probably going to be Hindus.
Yeah.
Most of the houses that me and my partner went and looked at to rent, I had my iPhone out looking at the northeast axis to make sure of like where I can place the mandir. And when they're like going into these places in the house, the society that accepted us that we're living at now, they were over the moon. They were beside themselves to the point where the landlord invited his parents to like literally came and introduced. And mind you, this guy's in his like mid to late 40s. His parents are in their like late 60s, early 70s. And they're like seeing this Gora like look at where like this corner of the room is to make sure the mandir is, and they're going like, what is it again?
Gare bhi puja karte hai. That's how you told me.
Yeah. And I mean, it's something that's instilled into me now.
Yeah.
I'm still finding my feet with Hinduism as a whole, but I've got more or less the basics down pat in terms of getting the outer framework of it correct, that I can begin to work within it. And yeah, I mean, they're all, anyway, everyone's been really friendly and everyone's been very hospitable. They're surprised that there's this Gora that's actually like, one, participating in Hinduism and living in Gujarat. But, I mean, it's, at the end of the day, it's my story, I guess. And, there's things in this plane of existence that brought me here. There's things in the ethereal plane of existence that brought me here, whatever the overarching terms are. But I love it, man. Bharat Sundar hai. Ahmedabad Sundar hai. I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm glad. I'm over the moon that I met you, because I mean, it was destined to be. Well, I'm not going to lie. It's the way it was intended to be, and I'm glad it's in a great city, right? It's got a lot of beauty to it. It's It's got a lot of great infrastructure. It's got problems, but you know, comparatively to the layout of the city, it's minuscule comparative. And the food. I mean, look,
Pleasure is mine, by the way.
I'd say the pleasure's mine. But one of the other things that I noticed, the produce.
Mm-hmm.
The produce here is excellent comparative to Australia. And not to knock on Australian farmers or anything like that, but I don't know what the fuck they're doing because the produce here is miles ahead. Like I couldn't believe it when I ate things that I wouldn't normally eat, right? Like I wasn't really an onion eater.
Mm-hmm.
But I came here and I started eating onions. I'm like, holy shit. Like this
Oh,
thing's
it's
like,
way
I
different.
bit it. It's like it has its own personality. It has that much life in it. And that's just one vegetable, bro. I'm not getting into all the fruits and everything, but all the produce has sustenance in it. Like, and I noticed it
It has prana.
immediately.
It has prana. It has a characteristic.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you guys are having white onions, is it?
We've got red, but mainly white.
Mainly white. Yeah, that's the difference. Red, white onion is mostly like that spice that.
Yeah, it's used for cooking. I mean,
It's
they're
used
both
for
used for
cooking.
cooking, but reds are generally served in like salads, essentially.
Yeah, because it has a characteristic.
Yes.
It has a flavor. It has a taste.
Correct.
It the white onion is mostly used for plain spice, like a chili factor, a little burn that it gives you.
I'm always going to be worried about that little burn.
Why?
Because I've got a Gora gut. Because I've got a Gora belly. And my Gora belly's... It's adjusted now.
No,
you've
been having food at my house without issues.
Yeah, but you know, like this is a problem I've noticed that placates a lot of restaurants and places to eat. People will just pack things with spices and expect like the spices to cover the flavor profile.
No, doesn't work.
It doesn't work. But
in my house,
not in your house.
no, we never use garam masala, like the hot masala that is used, which comes pre-packed and pre-mixed. We don't have that in our house.
Yeah, I've noticed.
It's not been there since 7-8 years.
Yeah. It's unnecessary.
It's unnecessary, absolutely.
But I think people use like garam masala and different styles of masala and you know hot spices, hot chili, red chili, etc. as some sort of. I think they think it's just a flavor profile, but it's not.
It's not.
Yeah, there might be a little bit, but it's not really the case.
Because how every spice is different.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want the characteristic of the spice to come as a whole, then you need to basically know where in the hierarchy of things that go into the fry or the pan, in what sequence they go in, and what oil, what goes first, what goes after. So it's a bit complicated.
Yeah.
Let me put it that way. But if you want to do Indian cooking well and healthy, and you want the flavor of those particular spices, to come into your mouth in a unison, but in a differentiated manner, then you need to know that sequence.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that sequence.
It takes time. It takes a while.
It takes time.
And basically, every Indian household cooks differently.
Yeah, naturally.
We don't have anything like recipe standardization.
No.
Right. So I think that's
everyone thinks they're butter chicken, or everyone thinks they're aloo bhaji, or whatever the dish might be. Everyone thinks their dish is the best dish. I'm being facetious when I say this, but I mean that their recipe is the recipe that's been handed down from their parents and their grandparents, etc., and that's been the one that's been common. But next door, and across the way, is what might be wildly different.
Yeah, and home cooking is a thing.
Oh yeah, that's
we still prefer to cook 3 meals at home.
Yeah,
but that's changing, which is a good and a bad thing, because now women are joining the workforce very rapidly. So that transition is happening, and they were the primary caregivers.
Yeah,
men, apart from certain communities, don't cook that often. Even I don't cook that often. But yeah, that's the way it has been. So now people have started storing food and buying from outside. It's reflecting on their health, but,
absolutely.
But then we need to do something about it.
Well, that's where the business comes in. So, I mean, the tertiary food industry, the processed food industry, I was shocked at how massive it was here. I didn't think. I didn't have any real expectation of how big it was. But when I see like 200 different brands of the same type of biscuit, or 200 brands of the, of a chocolate bar,
Mm.
or 30 different brands of ice cream, and not even including frozen dessert, whatever the fuck that is, has bewildered me in such a respect, because I know what that industry has done to the average Westerner.
Mhm.
The tertiary food industry has absolutely ruined people's gut health, people's mental health, and their overall well-being. It's completely destroyed it. But it was promoted in such a way to attach to what you would mention about both family members now participating in the workforce. So something needs to fill in the void of convenience. And that's where the tertiary food industry is dominated. And that's obviously why it's starting to, and currently, or seems to be, dominating in India. Now, it doesn't mean in all respect, because everyone still is cooking. Most people are still cooking.
Most
at
people
home.
are.
But I suspect,
But it's also a generational shift, right?
correct.
So it's, I mean, it would have started. I'm just playing. I'm just playing a simulation in my head that it would have started with a few people, and then as the generation changed and household rules
Yeah.
changed,
Yeah.
then people would have picked it further,
Yes.
and that's how most Western recipes, like things that were cooked at home, were lost.
Correct.
And now you have sandwiches, cold sandwiches, which is absolute abomination. My God. And burgers and cheeseburgers and
Oh, yeah.
fries and pizzas. I assume people just don't consume those things.
Oh, they're consuming it all the time. Dude, it's
What do you mean?
so like
So what is being cooked at home?
the thing, I can only speak to Australia, but the common home cooked meals you would see as,
Please abandon Vegemite.
well, look, Vegemite generally is across most Australian households, but it's a condiment. Obviously, they're not. I mean, you might have a couple of out there loony people that put it into their, they try and create some fusion thing that they've actually enjoyed and create something like that. Fair enough. But the average morning breakfast is either going to be bacon and eggs
Mm-hmm.
on one side,
Not bad.
or processed cereal on the other. That's the bad one, and that's the one that you find leans into a lot of younger families because it's much more convenient. I don't have time to cook because I've got to drop the kids off at school and I've got to get to work. So I'm going to give my children a bowl of Fruit Loops instead of cooking a nice breakfast for them. Right?
I got Fruit Loops once.
Yep.
Threw them out.
It's just high processed fructose corn syrup.
Yeah. It's garbage.
Full of soy lecithin and everything, and it just absolutely ruins. And that's just one food, bro. That's not even getting into all the others. So that's, and I mean, I'm not knocking on Fruit Loops specifically. I mean, coming from Australia, I grew up on Fruit Loops as well. So I know, I love the taste of them, but I know they're completely dangerous to the system. But then you've got Cocoa Pops and you've got Rice Bubbles and you've got all these extra ones. Australia's adopted all the American cereals now as well, Lucky Charms and all these things. They've adopted it all. So it's gotten even worse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even including the lunch. The lunch, a lot of workers, a lot of people that are blue collar and white collar workers, a lot of the younger people, like in their sort of middle 30s to late 30s, even I would even argue into early 40s, they go out and buy lunch while they're at work. They don't really have a pre-packed meal a lot of the time because it comes back to that idea that you mentioned that both the man and the woman are both working, right? They don't have enough time. So that convenience factor has to fill in for that requirement of sustenance. So both man and woman, the husband might be a blue collar worker, the wife might be a white collar worker, vice versa, whatever the case may be, and they go to the nearest 7-Eleven for lunch. They go to the nearest McDonald's for lunch, the nearest KFC, Pizza Hut, Subway, list goes on. They'll go and get something quick and easy out of convenience. But all of that food over months and years takes a significant toll on the body.
Oh, yeah.
And it leads to an abundance of problems, whether that's in your psyche, your gut health, your immune system, your skin health. Acne is a major problem amongst a lot of young people. And that acne, and the severity of acne has gotten worse. And that's because of a high processed diet of fructose, of soy lecithin, just general high quantities of sugar, high quantities of carbohydrates that your system traditionally is not built for, right? If we look at humans, anatomically humans, our system and what we've been able to digest and what we're not able to digest, and our evolution and things of that nature, we weren't built for a hyper commercialized food industry. We just weren't. But now we're at a stage where a lot of people in the West have problems, and now they're sourcing a more natural approach. And I fell into this category as well, looking for a more natural approach to fixing the fundamental problems within the body to show the reflection on the physical, whether that is the brain, the gut, the skin, the immune system. And those four things are the things that are targeted the most when it comes to the processed food industry. And it's not like the pharmaceutical industry is doing anything to better it. It's not like they're doing anything they're not telling you stop eating this. It's not like the government's putting in blocks and saying, doing this and banning this. Hell, Australia allows titanium dioxide to be put into certain food groups, right? That's traditionally in India. It's used in paint. It's used as a glossing agent. But in Australia in 2018, they deregulated it and allowed it to be put into bread. And they allowed it to be put into, bread variants, burger rolls, dinner rolls, sliced white bread, all these things. And I mean, that's just one problem. But my point being is that there's a whole industry that is built upon a system of unethical behavior, which has caused a rampant problem within people's general well-being.
So, working in the food industry,
Mm.
what I have come to understand is this, that if you want to make the entire processed food value chain works on preservation,
Yes.
right? If you want to preserve anything, you have to make it on a scale. The longer you want to preserve it,
Yeah.
the more inedible you have to make it.
Yeah.
You have to reduce the bioavailability.
Correct.
You have to reduce the number of nutritional chemicals, for a lack of better words, or the nutrients
Yeah.
in food. You have to make that number come down.
Yeah.
So that
Bacteria doesn't eat it.
none of the maggots want to eat it.
Correct.
And then that same food is served for human consumption.
Mm.
And if you think with this mental model, then everything becomes clear.
Yep.
The best mental models are those which explain a lot of things. When you put them across, a lot of things fall in their place. And when I went through the onion value chain, the cereal value chain, and a lot of other processing food products, basically, what I understood was that whatever is sealed in plastic and has 3 months, 4 months, 5 months longevity on the product packaging, if there is no chemical treatment to it, say nitrogen packing or something like that, then I deem it inedible.
Absolutely.
And I have seen things. I have seen maggots not eating. Maggi masala, right? Maggots not eating that.
It's no different in Australia. Just high processed noodles filled with additives and what do you call them? What's soy lecithin classified? Emulsifiers.
Emulsifiers. Yes.
So just throw in a ton of emulsifiers, increase shelf life, reduce nutrition.
And damage, or you have to make it dangerous.
Not even the flies want to touch it, mate.
Or you have to make it dangerous.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the game. And where does Aumstead appear in this?
Right.
Gamut?
So Aumstead's aim is to sit in the middle between this high processed food industry
Mm-hmm.
and people's well-being.
Okay.
So these industries, they're not going away anytime soon. Everyone knows that. But it's about recognizing the problem
Mm-hmm.
and providing a solution to begin reversing the effects of what that food industry as a whole, the tertiary food industry, has done to the human body. So Olmsted aims at fixing the mental problems, or at least targeting the mind to make things more clear, like improve clarity, improve cognitive function, memory, recollection, processing speed, improve the gut health, so reduction of toxins in the gut biome, improving gut flora health, detox. So that's a major one, and the skin health and the lymphatic system. So your immune health. Sorry, when I say lymphatic system. So improving the blood flow, and the transference of the correct cells to the correct areas, and improving your white blood cell count, and all these extra factors that comes with essentially looking after that fundamental thing that arguably is one of the most important organs subsequently to the brain, which is the gut. That's how I see it, as like the mum, right? The gut and the brain are like the mum and dad to the rest of the organs. If one's out, the other one's going to fall shortly thereafter, because they lose this correct line of communication. And that comes because you completely ruin your gut biome with these emulsifiers. And they cause problems like leaky gut syndrome, which funnily enough isn't even recognized by the World Health Organization, but I'm not going to get into that. But it's essentially an inflammation.
Just put that out briefly.
Yeah. So what leaky gut syndrome is, essentially, is it's a massive inflammation of not just your stomach, but also your small and your large intestines. And what that does is when the digestive process happens, those chemicals that are released from the food aren't being digested, and they end up seeping through the intestinal wall, and they come into your body, they come into your bloodstream, they come into your muscle fibers, they come into your fat stores, and they present themselves on the skin as skin dermatological problems, right? Psoriasis, acne, pimples, eczema, a whole host of problems. But these are essentially your body's reaction to what you're putting in. And it's almost a staunch reminder of what you're putting in. If you're developing severe eczema and severe acne and psoriasis, especially in the middle-aged groups and people sort of like 30 to 50, that's because of this abuse of the tertiary food industry. These things aren't normal human conditions. They haven't been. This is a modern thing. And Olmsted sits in that position to not just provide the recognition to these problems, but the solution as well. So I don't know. We speak about, I guess, the main component.
We'll come to that. But,
Okay.
An interesting nugget here is that Ayurveda looks at skin problems exactly how you described.
Yeah.
So if you go to a good Ayurvedic practitioner, and mind you, the qualifying term is a good, experienced Ayurvedic practitioner.
Yeah.
Any disease on the skin is understood as a reflection of a deeper problem.
Yes.
And you can keep treating the skin, but it'll always come back if the deeper problem is not resolved.
Absolutely.
And that's how Ayurveda looks at it. And it's a very individualized process, because the understanding is that everyone's body type, genetics, the place where they're born, what they consume on a daily basis is different, right?
Yeah.
Ayurveda is a very personalized science that way. In a good way and a bad way. In a good way because if you really find a good practitioner, they can zero down to the exact problem.
Yep.
In a bad way because it's hard to scale something like that. At least at the treatment level. You understand, it will never appear like Western medicine.
I would say because the Western pharmaceutical industry predicates itself on immediate band-aids.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you've got pain, take this. This has got codeine in it. It's going to numb you out. right?
Yeah.
But that obviously is a band-aid on what a deeper problem is.
Correct.
It seems like Ayurveda has this process. It takes maybe a week or 2 weeks of a repetitive.
I can show you. I can tell you remedies which have immediate effect.
Yeah.
But then what you're saying is more or less correct.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's from my understanding and in my personal experience from what I've done.
Mhm.
And I mean, I went and saw your Ayurvedic doctor last year,
Mhm.
and I have a problem with my right leg. And we spoke extensively about my problem with my varicose veins. And he said, before we can come to the fix of that, and he did this thing, and you'd have to fill in the blanks for me because I was still trying to wrap my head around it.
That's called Nadi Parikshan.
Nadi Purish.
We have the three energy flows here.
Yep.
And I exactly don't know what they do.
Yeah.
But they put three fingers.
Yep.
And basically how this area is getting regulated.
Yeah.
They figure out the nature of your body, the issues that you have.
Yeah.
Good practitioners with just a touch of a finger here tell whether somebody's pregnant or not.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Well, he knew. So the Ayurvedic doctor did it to me.
It's called Nadi Parikshan.
Nadi Pariksha.
But Nadis are the three Nadis.
Yep.
And Parikshan is analysis.
Okay. He did it to me, and after
Or testing.
After like, I don't know, 1 minute of having his hands there, he came back and said, my heart area, this central region of my body has a blockage.
Oh.
He's like, everything else is fine. He's like, your root chakra all the way up is fine. And from your crown to your throat is fine. He's like, there's a blockage in your heart. And I'm like, what the fuck? Not specifically my heart, but that region there. And that's where I've had a problem, right? A skin related issue. So he gave me a set of guidelines. Basically, I had to go on a liquid diet for sort of 3 days and then slowly introduce myself back onto a semi-solid and then back onto a solid diet. No meat products. It was purely vegetarian, and very, very light eating essentially for like a couple of weeks. And I did it. I didn't notice a massive shift or, at the time there was a lot of things that were sort of happening. But after going back to Australia and then coming back to India, during these periods of time, I did a little bit of research into some alternative options to sort of create a remedy that is inspired by Ayurveda, essentially, which aims to almost create a very similar solution, but is palpable for a Westerner to get their head around. Because if I go, like I mentioned about the experience with Hanuman Chalisa and the experience with Krishna and trying to explain these things, if we look at Ayurveda, to a Westerner, their brain's not going to be able to wrap their head around it because they just look at it as like some foreign thing. What's Ayurveda? Not what oil up my nose. Why would anyone put oil up my nose? Huh? Like, I don't know, I'm just using one example out of Ayurveda, but my point being is that it's hard for them to sort of wrap their head around. But you know what's not hard for them to wrap their head around? Supplements. They have become addicted to supplements because supplements fill in that void where the tertiary food industry fills in, the convenience factor. So this is where Aumstead sits, is to fill in that void and also adhere to the convenience where someone can just take a couple of capsules a day for like a week, maybe 2 weeks, and they will see a massive shift in terms of not just their gut health, but what that's actually having on, what impact that's having on their mind, their skin, and their immune system. And I've obviously tested it on myself with the particular thing that we have discussed and is going to go out there. And that's where that convenience factor comes in. So that's where Aumstead's sort of like poised. It not just to fit into that market of the Ayurveda, inspired by Ayurveda well-being market. It's that market that the Westerners are very comfortable with so far, which is the convenience of the supplements, and then that introduction of that well-being factor to actually create a solution that create a solution for the remedy, create the remedy to sort of not dissolve in its whole form, but to rectify the issues that plague the tertiary food industry on the individual. And yeah, so we sort of formulated formulated particular ingredients that work in tandem with one another to target specific things. So obviously I mentioned the brain, the gut, the lymphatic system or the immune system, and skin health. Like a couple of powders or a couple of the herbs that we're going to be using. Brahmi powder as one. So that's been shown in many Western studies to improve cognitive function across the board, memory recollection, processing speed, etc. Shankapushpi powder. Ashwagandha is one that many Westerners now are starting to use in their daily or weekly diets. Putting them in smoothies and post-workout smoothies, morning smoothies, that sort of thing. So there's already a slow-growing market. Teas, that's another one. Turmeric is obviously something that has been used in the Western market for a while, but in a very, very minute form, as opposed to how it's used here in India. So there's a few things like that. Gotu kola powder is like another one. Things like that. So that's obviously to target the skin health. But at like a, at a sort of like at a base level, and I'm not going to get into those specific ingredients, but a couple of the ingredients there are bases to rectify the prominent issues that exist in the gut. And then subsequently, those issues are rectified, and then the rest of the herbs play this healing game to fix those specific things. The brain, and not fix like someone's got something wrong. It's just we can't deny the science when it comes to the nature of the tertiary food industry, emulsifiers, and how it behaves on the human body. But we also can't deny these traditionally used Ayurvedic herbs that exist in India that are now, in some cases, are being exported to the West to be used in teas and smoothies, etc., and how they fix those elements of the body where the tertiary food industry attacks those specific parts of the body. So yeah, that's where Aumstead sort of sits, and I'm really looking forward to the launch, and the reception behind it as well.
I think because now Bharat is the population, the demography of this country is trying to replicate the West.
Yeah.
So these products also make sense for Indians as well.
Correct.
I know a lot of people who, despite being born here, have absolutely no clue about the kind of things that we have discussed.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And we've seen quite a few examples.
Yeah, I have.
And that has been a point of fascination for a lot of people. And I guess it's a sense of irritation for a lot of people as well, because they thought that this is our inheritance.
Yeah.
What is this Gora guy?
What is the Gora guy coming and stealing our stuff? How dare you? But you know what? At the end of the day, it's going to launch. It's going to launch in India. It's going to launch in Bharat. It's going to target an Indian market, and then it will target a global market. I mean, we'll go Australia first, and then the rest of the globe. But I agree. You have a growing middle class in India, right? An expansive GDP because of that growing middle class, and because there's this idea that's being brought into the social culture and the social culture within India, that there is a larger now female working class. More children are getting into schools, and obviously adolescents getting into schools and whatnot. So there needs to be an allowance for more convenience, or an allowance for that convenience. And I don't want to see India as a whole subject itself to the same problem that the West has experienced for the last 2-3 decades. So that's what we're here for, bro.
Yeah.
We're to make sure that even though we can't stop that tyrannical beast in the corner that's going to keep growing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, at least we can provide a shield to deflect the majority of the fire that it spits out. So yeah, I can't wait, man. I can't wait to launch it.
I think the base proposition or the principal proposition is that this thing has value,
Mm.
and for me it was like this stuff exists,
Yeah.
right? I did not see the inherent value in it, because sometimes what's happening in your house, it doesn't incite curiosity. But when you came in and
Mm.
brought in this factor of a commercial, uh, sort of say a commercial enterprise evolving around what we are continuously doing at in our homes,
Mm.
then I thought about it and I thought, okay, uh, there's money to be made
Mm.
and people's lives to be improved.
Mm.
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
It has it, and it definitely has made a lot of difference to you personally.
yeah. Well, I started my own practice with one of the ingredients a little while ago. I had liver damage from years of Doritos and Mountain Dew and dragon slaying, and I noticed now I started applying it first before I started ingesting it. And on the first application, I was shocked at what it did on the surface within the first application. And like after only having it on for, having the application on for an hour, give or take. I mean, I left it on for a bit longer. I mean, some people say like, only 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to do the whole hour and see what happens. And I was shocked at how much of a change there was in the skin tone and the clearness of my skin on those particular areas within the first application. And I'd obviously already done like a little bit of research into the ingestion of this, and turns out there was actually quite a lot of research when it comes to the nature of ingesting it on small scale studies, but enough to confirm. And then, of course, then there's the historical notes as well.
You're talking about particular blends.
I'm talking about the particular blends and how they behave. So I started ingesting it as well, and I noticed from the first 3 days of ingesting that problem from the surface level of the skin begun to diminish rapidly. Now it had already diminished on some level from the out level, from the physical application on the skin, but when I ingested the blend, my gosh, I couldn't believe it. So I just kept on doing it, and it was only a little bit. Like, it's not like I engorged myself on it or anything like that. I mean, you might think otherwise because I kept on mentioning it, to the point where my missus now has like a tagline like superhero name for me.
I don't blame her.
She's finding bits of the blend like all over the house and stuff. She's like, oh my gosh. But I'm like, okay, well, if it worked for me, considering the sheer volume of genuine damage that I did to my own body from years of abuse, and bear in mind, like a lot of ignorance to
And
why I did it, but it works.
I mean, you were kind of an extremist in some ways,
I was,
but
yes.
I think you got data and science behind,
Correct.
right, to
Yeah.
back you up.
Yeah.
You've already done that information accumulation, and we're obviously going to consult practitioners.
Yeah.
For that. So I don't see that extremism as a problem at all.
No.
And also, so I believe that whatever you want to do, the impact, you should just go out there and demonstrate it.
Yeah.
And then people will follow suit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I personally am not a very good. I'm not very fond of persuasion, like verbal persuasion.
Yeah.
Right? I believe in doing things, demonstrating,
Yeah.
and creating curiosity out of action, rather than just going out there and talking.
Yeah.
And that's what we are going to do.
Yeah.
We are going to sample these things out.
Yes.
We're going to take the feedback.
Yep.
And when people benefit from it, my understanding is that market works in a fair way.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
And when this thing makes a difference to the lives of individuals, they are going to tell their neighbors about it. They're going to tell their friends about it.
Yep.
And that's how this thing will grow. So,
Word of mouth. Word of mouth goes a very long way, man. When it's when it's something that genuinely works and people go like, wow, this like actually made a significant difference to my father or my grandmother or whatever, even if like it was just a small sampler they got to try and worked it, however it forms itself in that sort of region, you're right. They'll tell their neighbors, they'll tell their friends, it'll come up in conversation. And I believe, and I know that this brand, this company, this product, this blend is destined, is poised to not necessarily dominate the entire market, but gain such traction that
Why not?
well, I mean, I would love to, yeah.
Grace of the Mother.
By Bhagwan.
Bhagwan.
I pray. But I know that it's going to do its job effectively and improve the lives of the everyday person that has to settle for the ever adapting and ever changing societal norms to the new technological age, where they require something to fill in that void of convenience.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to go down to McDonald's to get a aloo tikki burger, or I mean, in the West it would be a Big Mac, a double quarter pounder, or go to KFC for a 12-piece feed, or whatever the case may be. Just quick, easy, convenient, processed food. I don't want that. It's always going to exist, as I said. But if you offer a solution that's as convenient, they can take that, they can do a world of wonder to their gut health and subsequently the rest of their well-being. And then they don't necessarily need to feel that guilty, or they don't need to suffer from the worst outcomes of the consumption of that tertiary food industry. I'm not telling people to stop, like don't go and eat that. I can't tell people to stop it, but I can provide a solution to mitigate the real world effects of that industry.
I think these are the things you can never go back onto.
100%.
Right? Once an industry has been formed, there's a McDonald's around the corner, and
Yep.
once in a while, I think you should go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, ease out.
Yeah, 100%.
But at least the introduction of Ayurvedic and natural medicine and wellness products
Yep.
should be given to people at convenience and in a format that they understand.
Yep.
After that, it is their own curiosity and how much they want to take care of themselves. So they can definitely graduate to higher levels of well-being and whatnot. They can graduate to meditation and do whatever. But simpler stuff that makes difference in the lives of individuals.
Yeah.
And is a bang for their buck also.
Yeah, 100%.
And let me tell you this, that most of the things that we discussed, pricing and at what cost things are getting sold in the West, right? It's like 10 rupees spent here, it goes to a European country or Australia, and it's getting sold for 1,000 there.
Yeah.
The process is unknown. The process to consume Ayurvedic things, the interval is unknown. It's basically getting sold out as straight jacket packaging, and you take a scoop, put it in water, put it in milk, and take it. Doesn't work like that.
Correct.
Right? And you've seen enough demonstration of that when we were discussing. I think you made like something with haldi. And it appeared like paint.
Yeah.
It appeared terrible. And then you told me the cost that you paid for that. I was mortified. Wow.
Well, I remember you mentioning to me about the woman, that had an overdose on turmeric. Because someone in the West, I guess, however she looked at it, she was convinced that like, I'm just going to up my turmeric. And then she took too much and then had some sort of reaction to it and ended up in hospital. I can't remember if she died or whatnot, but
she didn't die, but she had some kind of acute dehydration.
That's right.
Which is known, which is a characteristic of turmeric.
Yeah.
Right?
But that's not something that's discussed in the West.
Well, people are just putting it in warm water. Turmeric, like tea, like I don't have a better example, but like THC has to be heated.
Yes.
And has to be heated with some kind of fat content. And then normally speaking, the way to consume it is that. And it has to be taken in very, very small quantities.
Correct.
It's also for physical application.
Huh.
That's a different thing.
Yeah.
And in the physical application aspect, you can rub a kilo on your body, and even then it's going to show some effect, right? Because it will dehydrate your skin,
Yeah.
and then the dosage will determine how much dehydration happens.
Yeah.
But especially when you're ingesting things, you should be really careful. And most of the things are safe, but you will never know what might end up irritating you. Also, the effect, if taken without um, a lot of these a lot of things that are getting consumed in the West, from where I see it, they're just consuming them out of the box,
Yes.
which is something that should not happen,
Correct.
right? There are only minimum things that you can do, and we are just trying to do that.
Yep.
We are not getting into complicated territory.
No.
Because as I told you, that Ayurvedic is an individualized science. So you should first go and consult a good Ayurvedic practitioner.
Correct.
The good Ayurvedic practitioner.
Yep.
That's a problem because of the non-standardization.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a huge challenge.
No.
Right? You can go through word of mouth.
Mm.
You can have good friends who can tell you that they now know someone good.
Yeah. And
right. So we are operating in a safe territory.
We have to operate in a safe territory.
Nothing
Like
complicated.
we can't overcomplicate, and the aim of the business is, as you mentioned, it's not to overcomplicate it. Like
But to introduce.
Correct. And all the dosages are in accordance with the Ministry of Ayush.
Okay.
So all their public information, including dosages for each individual herbal, whatever the ingredients are, all of the ingredients, except a couple, but anyway, they're all on the Ministry of Ayush, and they all go through the denominations around how much you're meant to consume per day. So turmeric, as a great example, you should not consume more than 2 grams at max per day. And even then, it says between 1 to 2 grams, but we're not even close to that ballpark. Like, we're giving, a fifth of that out of the course of, let's say, 2 capsules in one day. But the whole point of the smaller dosages over a short period of time, as opposed to just taking the maximum dosage, is that your body's able to become comfortable. Your gut health essentially is able to rectify the problems in almost like a harmonious balance without throwing things out, without having an adverse reaction, essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've done a lot of late night reading, a lot of research, the bloody studies that I've had to go through. I was actually shocked by how many Harvard studies there were on a lot of these Ayurvedic herbs that come out of India. I was actually flabbergasted.
There's a whole there's a whole conversation to be done on patent wars and
Oh yeah.
What Harvard is doing with those studies. Another conversation.
Yeah, but the whole process to get to here it's been a very fruitful one. It's come with challenges along the way. Thank you, FRRO. But at the end of the day, even though there's been those challenges, they've turned into blossoming flowers that have provided in many respects and provided the opportunities in many respects for this idea to come to fruition. And I'm glad I get to launch it with you.
My pleasure.
I'm glad I get to launch it in the first place. And I'm looking forward to the future and seeing how it really shines in the capital market. And I believe wholeheartedly that it will shake up quite a large section of the capital market, especially revolving around this idea of well-being. And yeah, I guess we just got to sort of wait and see what happens. But I can't wait to launch it, bro. It's going to be the best.
I think this is a good point to conclude.
Yeah.
And
fantastic.
We'll see the audience again.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. Can't wait to be on the next one.
Yeah, you have to be there.
Maybe we can do a recording maybe we'll take this on the road. We'll do a recording in Rishikesh. I'm being facetious, obviously.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to have a little swig of scotch or something like that.
You got quick at reflecting.
Yes.
Yes.
Anyway, all right, we're leaving it. Done.
So, in your standard way, we'll leave the audience. We'll love you and leave you.
Yeah, we'll love you and leave you. Leave them a little bit bewildered. And
Gora,
गोरा
Gora,
गोरा क्या गोरा पूछ खाते हैं.
Yes.
All right.